Great, thank you, Greg. So hello, we are Team 20, and our project, as Greg mentioned, is on redistricting school zones in Durham County. My name is Zina Jadi, and I'm a rising senior.
My name is Michelle Majakula. I'm a rising sophomore.
And I'm Cassie Hamilton. I'm a rising sophomore.
Great. So just starting off with Durham's history with segregation, just a really quick recap. So Durham has had two public school districts in the 1970s, one for the city and one for the county, and they were officially desegregated in 1970. However, this occurrence caused white flight. Fast forwarding a little bit, in 1992, the two districts merged in attempts to make schools more diversified. However, still currently, there are no guidelines to ensure that child enrollment mirrors the racial demographic in Durham. So this has essentially created racially and economically public schools and charter school systems, which have complicated district planning. So considering Durham's history of segregations in schools, this has essentially led us to the question of how do we equitably draw new school zones. So in attempts to answer this overarching question, we aim to generate school districts that are equitable and reflective of the population of Durham County. The overall motivation for this project is that Durham County will actually be redistricting this fall, which will create plans for the next 10 years. So this is pretty significant. That being said, we pursued to generate districts that were evaluated based on the following criteria: socioeconomic status, race, walkability, which is basically how friendly the school is to walking, as well as maintaining one school per district. We essentially picked these criteria as we believe that incorporating these would create more equitable opportunities for students across the county.
Okay, so the biggest criteria in this project we considered when drawing these plans was the racial distribution. We worked with the racial distribution of our last 2000 districting plans on the basis of their reflection to the racial distribution of Durham itself. So if the R value, we used correlation coefficient, which is the R value. And if it was positive, there's a positive association. If it's negative, there's a negative association with Durham County. And the closer to one means the stronger the association. So we found the plans that were most reflective of Durham's racial population. So this being like the plan with the highest R value for both Black and white, and the plans with the lowest R value for both Black and white. And we use these R values and the deviation from Durham's racial population, both Black and white, to draw these maps according to the 258 nodes. So that's why on the left you see that the least segregated school zones, which is the one with the highest R value, the colors are definitely more toned down because they're farther from Durham's racial distribution.
So we also evaluated on income, and these three histograms show our value distributions as well by income and then by race for both Black children and white children by districting plan. And so we use these same 2000 plans and created these distributions, also incorporating where the current existing districting plan falls on these graphs. So you can see the yellow lines in all three graphs. And we also wanted to take into consideration that there are definitely underlying other compounding factors that are influencing these. So these yellow lines with the current districting plans is not taking into account students that may attend charter schools or private schools, which is a really high population of white students in highly concentrated Black areas. You can see the three yellow lines, and although they may seem at or above average in all three of these graphs, it's also maybe a slightly misconstrued considering that there are those other factors, like those students who do attend private and charter schools. And then to conclude, we want to acknowledge that although redistricting won't solve all of our problems, since creating integrated districts does require community buy-in, and even with completely integrated districts, they can be ineffective due to white flight or mass attendance of charter or private schools by white children. We do believe that redistricting can lay the groundwork to create a more equitable system. For example, community-driven recruiting towards public schools could lead towards integrated schools as long as the districts allow for it. So we really do believe that despite the challenges that do come with redistricting, that it can really be an effective means of integration and an effective means of creating successful environments for all students in the county, if it is invested in, and if people do buy into the system and to the public school districts.
Okay. So our data was acquired from the General Social Survey and the US Census. And we want to thank Paul Bendich, Gregory Hirschblog, and Ariel Don for organizing the Data Plus program, and to Greg and Bernard for their support in learning new skills in the field of data science.
Thanks a lot, Al. Any questions or point of discussions that anybody wants to bring up? I guess while folks are thinking, I'll ask each of you to sort of talk about your experience in this project in terms of what you learned in it, challenges you faced in it, things you realized during it, just anything about the process of going. Oh, sorry, Robert has his hand up. Robert, go ahead.
No, but you actually asked an interesting question. I can hold my question.
Okay, sounds good. So you guys want to talk about process first, and then we'll move on to Robert's question.
Yeah, definitely. I can start. I definitely learned a ton through this process. And there were a lot of challenges, especially through the data acquisition, since we were dealing with data surrounding children and people in the county, and we were working at the block level. It was challenging at times, especially when we were looking for income data to find data that fit our what we were looking for. So we did actually end up having to extrapolate block group level data and put that onto blocks. And there were some other hurdles that we encountered along the way. But I'd say probably just learning how to manipulate and work with data and how to visualize it was the most interesting thing to me. I think working with working with GeoPandas and being able to actually manipulate and visualize the county and where the lines were drawn was really cool. So
I think personally for me, I learned a lot as well. I've always felt like pretty comfortable with Python, but using it in a platform in which, once again, we're visualizing data was like very new for me, I would say. And working with, reading files and manipulating files the way you wanted them to be, it was definitely like something I was kind of familiar with, but like at the same time, I learned a lot, and it was pretty challenging in the beginning. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Cassie and Michelle. Personally, before even participating Data Plus, I'd only taken Comp Sci 101, and I definitely struggled even through that class. But it was definitely nice applying skills learned in that class, and obviously learning new skills in a real world issue, not just fake assignments, and just doing things for a grade. So it's definitely rewarding, and definitely enjoyed meeting new people and just everything. I think it was just amazing.
One of the ways I've heard it phrased that I've enjoyed in the past is you when you take classes, you are demonstrating things, and then all of a sudden you get out into the world and you're communicating things that you're finding, and that's a big difference in terms of the demonstration is supposed to prepare you for the communication, but it's always a big jump. But thanks a lot for your answers; those are great. Robert, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I was just curious. So, I mean, Durham is going to do this this redistricting. I was going to start thinking about redistricting in the fall. Did you get any input from the city or from the county on things that they might have liked to do, things were they curious about things that were possible and things that weren't possible? And if so, what were they?
We didn't personally get the input from the county, although that is I think we talked with Greg about meeting with someone and maybe talking about that, but we never actually did. But we did, however, we had some resources that we looked into at the beginning when we started to talk about what we wanted to include and what we wanted to consider when we were redistricting. We, I don't know, Michelle and Zainab, if you want to jump in and help me remember the name, but kind of listened to some research on a podcast from a woman who had actually worked on in Durham County and looking at just what redistricting would look like there, but I don't remember exactly who that was or what her name was.
We almost got to meet with one of the people who was in charge of redistricting in Wake County, but the meeting fell through. And yeah, so it would have been a nice meeting to have.
I see. Are there, are there what you would consider to be successful precedents in other school districts, other counties?
Are you asking if like previously, like did we see any like?
No. I was just, so here you're looking at Durham.
Mhm.
Greg mentioned Wake. Is there another city in North Carolina that attempted this exercise and did something interesting?
Not that I know of.
You guys did that I think earlier on in the program, you guys heard a little bit about other practices other than that other than redistricting, about attempts to integrate districts, right? Do you see how that could play? Do you have any idea? Do you have any thoughts about how that would play into the redistricting stuff?
Yeah, we did talk a little bit at the beginning of the program about I think one of the most interesting things that we talked about that kind of did become a hurdle for us, although that's not something that we personally could do anything about, was charter schools and private schools. And what you can see in the history section that we said in 2007, there was a really big increase of charter schools. Obviously, that's not something we can control, but I'd say that like even with perfect integration plans, the counties or states that are successful are the ones who can get people who do have the resources to send their kids to private schools, and maybe in public school zones that they don't personally see as the most beneficial for their kid, getting them to stay and to invest in their own public school. And so if I can think of the name, if you'll give me a couple minutes, I can pull it up and I can think of the name of the podcast. I can't remember right now, but she talked about this when school becomes, oh God, what is it called? Decredited, or when they no longer have the accreditation from the state and the students are given the opportunity to move, like what happens with people who may not want those students at their school. So I'd say the biggest thing that we talked about that was probably the most interesting and the most impactful was buy-in in the community and how that can really make such a big difference.
Yeah. So, and Cassie, essentially what you're saying is that this can lay an environment, but it's not going to solve an issue.
Yeah, exactly. And you asked for like an example of what is an example of a county that you think has done this well. Well, I'm sure there are counties who have looked at this type of data and who've made integration plans that they think would be really effective, but it's a lot more based on the community, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, Genevieve, I missed your question in the chat. Where slash who do you all plan to talk to? Oh, I see. Yes. Sorry. I just missed your question in the chat. Sorry about that. But I'm glad it was answered. Yeah, and Cassie, so I mean, if you had some conclusions about these blue histograms, right? Which I think you had mentioned
Yes.
during the talk. So Durham is an example that's done a reasonably good job, right?
Yeah. So if you look at where Durham County's current 23 elementary school zones fall on there, it doesn't look bad if you're just looking at the data. But that data is acquired saying if we take every child in Durham County and they all went to public school, this is what it would look like, but they don't. So it's a little bit misconstrued in that way. Yeah, Durham County is kind of a perfect example, actually, of even the counties with great plans still cannot be integrated if the community doesn't buy into the plans.
Genevieve, do you have a question?
Yeah, I think it's more of like a comment maybe, but I was just gonna kind of add on to what Cassie said. Like, I agree as well that it's probably a community ordeal when you're talking about integration, and given like Durham was just integrated in 1970, I think you guys said, it was kind of crazy to think about. So I think like integration, like that's something we definitely want to aim for, but I think it's also going to have to do with like the attitudes of the people who are, of the students and the teachers and the other facilitators and administrators who are in these places or in these schools, and also the kids, because thinking about, like, for example, traditionally Black schools or predominantly Black schools and predominantly white schools, either one may not really be as like want to integrate, maybe. Like, that's something to also consider. But yeah, I think it's also just a matter of community and dealing with the people there.
Yeah, definitely. And parents as well. Like the kids only have so much say, but their parents can have a big say. Greg reminded me in the chat that it was nice white parents. So if you look into that podcast, that's an interesting lesson.
I guess just to throw in my perspective, I mean the issue of integrating schools is as deep as racism in the US is, and so this is something, you know, people, there have been a subset of people who have been trying to engage with for centuries now, and it's not something that's going to go away easily. So redistricting is an element, but it is only one of many elements in this whole process. I guess another question I'll ask you is if you were going to continue with this project, suppose for another 5 weeks or 10 weeks, or you just generally, what's the next thing you would want to learn? What's the next thing you'd want to do?
One thing I wanted to mention was I feel like, well, in Chicago, I feel like in many big cities, there's a lot of racially concentrated schools. And I think like the only counter to that has really been selective enrollment schools, which obviously isn't like the same as like public schools in terms of like, or neighborhood schools is what I'm thinking of, in the sense that you have to test to get into that school, or you have to make a pretty outlandish trip for some students. I think incorporating the idea of that would be important, just because I think it's the only solution I've seen in my city, in the sense that it's pretty diverse, and it comes with a lot of like, these schools tend to have a lot of funding because of the students have been doing so well, and because like the bar has been pretty high academically. So like they tend to be pretty well funded and pretty diverse. But yeah, just incorporating the idea of that into like counties like Durham, I guess, would be cool.
See, so let me just ask a follow-up question. So your city is Chicago?
Yeah.
So do you think that things like, so I mean, I have a son who teaches at Lindblom Science and Math Academy on the South Side.
Oh, no, that's good.
So do you think that these academies have been positive for Chicago?
I think in the terms of integration, yes, and academically, these schools have like they've been considered like kind of the only chance in like progressing academically in Chicago, which is an issue. Like these I feel like a lot of racially concentrated schools have just not been in Paris like up to par with these schools, and to even have a great chance in studying, a lot of kids have had to test for these schools because like schools that are racially concentrated don't tend to have enough funding at all. So yeah.
Cassie and Zadeb, would you guys mind giving your sort of thoughts on where you would take this project next?
Yeah, definitely. Zineb, you can go first.
Okay, sure. I think I was also because I know for this project we just focused on elementary schools. I know like it might be a stretch, but I was definitely also interested to see if it was only elementary schools that were like this segregated, but also look at it like in middle school and high school level to see if the trend continued through high school. Because I live in Wake County and I went to school where I know people were like bused to middle schools, but that stopped at high school level. So I think I was just interested to see like the trend with all of that. But obviously for this project specifically, of course, definitely generating more plans and just, I guess, just continuing the same thing that we've been doing and solidifying that.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't really think about that, but I think that would be really interesting considering middle and high school. I'd say for me personally, if we were to continue, I'd probably want to spend some time looking at the top scoring, highest R value plans that were randomly generated and figuring out what actual geographic elements they might share in common, how they're broken up in the district, that type of thing. Maybe looking at, okay, how could these plans be combined to create what might be the ideal redistricting plan for Durham County. And then also we started to look into walkability and scoring walkability, and we got close to that, but didn't actually have enough time to get any final analysis on that. So probably just to continue that a little bit more, add that factor, and then look at most successful districts across income, race, and walkability.
How to balance between all of those things. Yeah. Genevieve.
Oh, I just wanted to ask, what software or program did you guys use to make your map infographics on your poster? Because they look really nice.
Thank you. Yeah, we use GeoPandas, it's a Python program, and then for the histograms there, it's Matplotlib. Oh, and I think NumPy as well.
Did you say MATLAB and NumPy?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Greg. Were you talking?
No, I wasn't talking. I was just going to put the text into the chat.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, Matplotlib. Oh, Greg, I think you're direct messaging me. I don't think you're sending that.
I am direct because that's
yeah, Matplotlib. And then GeoPandas is the actual county visualizations you can see there.
Thank you. Also, how long did it take, I guess, to organize from getting a testable question and then getting the, I guess, understanding the coding skills that you needed and then going to the visualization of your data? Like, how long did each step of the process take?
It was a journey, that's for sure. Uh, I think we spent a good amount of time talking about where we wanted to go in the beginning, and then getting off the ground with GeoPandas was a little challenging because none of the three of us had worked with anything like that before. There's a lot of resources online, so that was helpful. And Greg was a extremely helpful tool as well. He's very experienced in all of this, so just being able to pick his brain was super helpful. But I'd say definitely like a few weeks to even just feel comfortable mapping things out on our own, probably, I'd say. And even like literally yesterday, we were asking Greg, like, okay, how do we get the colors to show up in this way so we can show the, like Michelle was and him were working yesterday really hard to get those visualizations at the top all finalized. So it's a process for sure. Michelle or Zineb, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, honestly, it took me, I feel like most of the whole, I think around, was it like 2 months to get comfortable with pandas. I will assume, I think just being thrown into it was pretty helpful in like making me figure it out myself. And I feel like Google's also like your best friend when it comes to like learning things in text as well. So that was definitely helpful too.
Mhm.
Yeah, same as well. I could definitely argue I'm still not even like super comfortable with it. I definitely need like some more practice. But yeah, I still definitely feel more comfortable than like from the beginning. So that's always a plus.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd say once you get comfortable with GeoPandas, it's pretty user friendly, which is nice.
Thank you guys.
Well, it's been a pleasure working with the three of you over the summer. Thanks a lot for a really nice presentation and really lively discussion. So let's give them a round of applause. And yeah, congratulations on completing Data Plus. Hope you have a few restful or adventurous or however you want to spend your few weeks before the semester begins.